Before we get started with this video, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone that watched my previous Life is Strange video. I was not expecting it to reach that amount of views in such a short period of time, and it definitely reminded me on how strange life can be sometimes. I was always intending to make more Life is Strange content for this channel, but especially after seeing how well the previous video did, it's given me even more of a motivation to sit down and make more content around this series that I care about and love so much. So the topic for this video is about returning characters for Life is Strange. I think this is a topic that is heavily debated amongst the community to this day. Is it necessary for a character from a previous Life is Strange game to appear in a future Life is Strange game? What's funny to me is that we've technically had a returning character in every Life is Strange game since Before the Storm. You could argue that maybe we shouldn't even count Before the Storm, seeing as how it was a prequel to the original game, so of course, while we were introduced to new characters, we also met a lot of familiar characters from the original game. Life is Strange 2 brought back David, and that was a unexpected appearance. True Colors, we got reunited with Steph, and of course, Double Exposure and Reunion brought back Max and Chloe. Personally, when it comes to Life is Strange, I don't think it has to be a mandatory thing to bring back previous characters. Especially when Life is Strange 2 was coming out, it was clear that the intention was to move on from Max and Chloe. And as much as I love Max and Chloe, I guess I was in the minority, because to my knowledge, a lot of people were angry. Certain fans, if you even want to call them that, were pretty angry about the fact that Max and Chloe weren't in Life is Strange 2. Or just generally speaking, Life is Strange 2 being a new story and a new adventure with different characters. I think, depending on how it's executed, there is space for a returning character or two. Now, I don't know if Life is Strange will continue. It's very possible that the series is done. Ignoring that potential reality for a moment, what if we did get another Life is Strange game that brought back previous characters? Which characters should return from a previous Life is Strange game for a new adventure? Today I am going to be talking about various characters throughout the Life is Strange universe that I believe could work as a returning character. Someone from the original game, someone from Life is Strange 2, someone from even True Colors, or dare I say Double Exposure, coming back and being added to a new story in a new Life is Strange game. There's no way I'm going to be discussing every character we've seen throughout the series. I'm just going to pick and choose certain characters that I think would make the most sense to bring back. Originally, I wasn't entirely sure how I should go about this video, but I think I do have a easy format that will make life simpler for me, editing wise, and for you guys watching said video. Or should I say, multiple videos. Originally, I was going to have this be one big video. However, I quickly realized during the recording and editing process of it that this would be a very lengthy video for the channel. And while I'm not entirely against making longer videos, I think it would still be easier to digest in parts. Okay, so I've decided the best way to approach this would be to look at each game separately. I'm going to look at each Life is Strange game, one after the other, and going over a few characters from each game that I think would make the most sense returning in a future Life is Strange game, if that ever happens. I've also decided to add a little extra challenge for myself, and this is where things will probably get really interesting, but also maybe a little controversial. For each game, I have selected one character to not only return, but to promote to a protagonist status. So as we go along every Life is Strange game, I have also selected one character from every game that I believe would make the most sense, promoting them to a playable protagonist for a new Life is Strange game. And as I've mentioned, this is going to be separated into parts. So part 1, the video you're watching right now, we are going to be focusing on characters from Life is Strange and Before the Storm, going over a few who I think should come back, and then promoting one from each game to a protagonist status. Part 2 will focus on Life is Strange 2 and True Colors. Part 3 will focus on Double Exposure and Reunion. With all that said, let's get this started. Okay, so obviously we need to start with Life is Strange, the original game that started it all. I think Victoria or Kate would make for the most sense to bring back from the original Life is Strange as characters who get involved with a new story, new cast of characters, meeting the protagonist, and hopefully answering some questions that I'm sure the player will have if we get to see these characters again. What happened to them after the events of the original game? What timeline are we in? Actually, after saying all that, it honestly wouldn't be that difficult to establish the history of these two characters if they did return. I recently did a playthrough of the original game, and during my playthrough, I was reminded of a few things that can happen to Kate and Victoria. So, it's very possible, guys, that both Kate and Victoria survives Arcadia Bay's storm. In fact, Victoria pretty much is confirmed to survive. If you sacrifice Arcadia Bay, there's a letter you can find from Victoria to David in Life is Strange 2. In addition to that, you chose to sacrifice Arcadia Bay. Guess what? Victoria is still active, posting on social media during the events of Double Exposure. And as for Kate, it's not for definite. However, if you save her in episode 2, she spends the rest of the game in a hospital. Who's to say that her family don't come and visit her? And she was able to leave the hospital and leave town before the storm hit Arcadia Bay. So Kate is a little bit more of a not for definite outcome. But when it comes to other characters surviving said storm, these are probably the best two picks. Victoria and Kate both potentially survived the storm. And this definitely can be something that comes up during the events of this hypothetical new game where we get reintroduced to these characters. Victoria or Kate, they're older, they've changed a bit. Maybe Victoria isn't as much of a bitch anymore. She could still be a little bit annoying, but she's not an antagonist to the player anymore. I can imagine Kate at an older age would be a little bit more confident within herself, and maybe we would see her sticking her neck out for other people, especially young girls, if they were being bullied the same way that she was when she was younger. So it would definitely be nice to see what these characters have been up to and how they've changed over the years. Maybe this hypothetical game would take place not long after the original, so it's before the events of Life is Strange 2, before the events of True Colors, definitely before the events of Double Exposure. We have a story that focuses on another cast of characters, and either Victoria or Kate shows up. Maybe it's just a year or two after the events of the original game. I like that idea, I think it would be interesting. Anyway, let's focus on one more character from the original game. So like I said, for each game I have selected one character who I believe could be promoted to a protagonist status. You ready? Warren. I've seen a fair share of both love and hate for this character. I like Warren a lot, I enjoyed his presence in the original game. I would argue that out of everyone from Arcadia Bay, or at least definitely Blackwell Academy, knowing that Warren definitely dies if you sacrifice Arcadia Bay definitely stung the most out of all the characters affected by the storm for me. However, out of all the characters from the original game that never came back, I think Warren would just make the most sense to promote him to a protagonist and make him playable in a new Life is Strange adventure. I say new, but this will admittedly be a nostalgia trip. The events of Double Exposure's ending resulted in Max fusing two timelines together, and this also affected the two endings from the original game, as we saw with Chloe coming back in Reunion, and she's a little bit messed up. She's a walking paradox. She has these conflicting memories and vision of her dying by Nathan, but also surviving a storm that now did and didn't happen at the same time. Now, Chloe isn't the only character that was affected by Double Exposure's ending. Safi, as well as everyone else at Caledon, were also affected. The thing is, though, everyone else at Caledon forgot. And I think the basic implication is that that is what happened to everyone else as well. However, we don't know for certain if that is the case. We never get to see one of the other characters from the original game to really confirm whether or not they remember. And we also have this dialogue, which I brought up in my previous video.
Arcadia Bay was brought back to life. Why aren't they stuck in that place too? My mom hasn't told me about any weird visions.
Have you told her about your visions? My point is, we don't know what's happening in Arcadia Bay.
In my opinion, I say this alone could very well hint to the idea that other characters have these conflicting memories and visions just like Chloe does. And if there was another character from the original game that would want to look into this and try to figure out what's going on, it would be Warren. Okay, with all that said, let's finally get to the pitch. This hypothetical game, focusing on Warren, would begin with us simply catching up with him. What has he been up to? This is 10 years after the events of the original game. How is he doing? What is he up to? Where has he ended up? The beginning of the game is pretty much just us reconnecting and getting reintroduced to Warren as a character. But then, the events of Double Exposure happens. Specifically the ending. So this game would start just as the events of Double Exposure was reaching its climax. So as we start our journey as Warren, Max is in the 5th chapter of her game in Double Exposure. She reaches the end of the chapter, the two timelines get fused together, and just like Chloe, Warren has been getting these conflicting visions and memories of the past. He's been moving forward, getting on with his life, just doing his own thing. But now suddenly he has these memories of being killed by a storm that didn't happen. This is weird. Maybe it's just a weird dream. But I'm having this dream again and again and again. And it feels so real, as if I'm actually there in Arcadia Bay being taken out by the storm. Why do I have other memories suddenly from Arcadia Bay that didn't happen? But maybe they did happen. Didn't they? And this is the start of the story. So, as established, Max pretty much became distant from everyone after the events of the original game if you sacrifice Chloe. So, Warren hasn't heard from Max in a long time, and to be honest, he has no reason to think that Max would have anything to do with this. There's no connections, at least not yet. Warren decides to take a trip to Arcadia Bay, a place he hasn't been to in a long time. And this is where we could obviously have some fun having a few other characters make a few appearances from the original game. For example, maybe when Warren arrives to Arcadia Bay, he gets a much more clearer and stronger vision of a storm getting real close to taking him out, and he remembers the Two Wells Diner. He sees that he's in the Two Wells Diner as the storm is approaching. So he decides to go to the Two Wells Diner. Who does he see? Of course, Joyce. We have a nice little reunion scene with these two characters talking to one another, and while it's nice at first, this is when Warren realizes that he's not the only one being affected by whatever the hell has happened, because he's having a nice conversation with Joyce, and Joyce mentions that she recently heard from Chloe saying that she's doing well via phone call or text message, and she's just out there doing her own thing. This confuses Warren because obviously Warren remembers attending Chloe's funeral 10 years ago. So how can Joyce be talking about her daughter being alive and well? Maybe a mention of Max could also come up here. This is also the same Chloe that died 10 years ago. So things just get even more confusing to Warren, but it makes him even more determined to try and figure it out and understand what's happened here. Maybe Warren pays a visit to Blackwell Academy and we see Principal Wells again, or Miss Grant, or Samuel. And during his visit, Warren remembers the events of the original game. Maybe he reminisces about the scene he had with Max in episode 4 during the party. Maybe he reminisces on the conversation he had with Max in the parking lot from episode 1. And then Nathan showing up to cause some trouble. So yeah, this would admittedly be a bit of a nostalgia trip for the player. We are revisiting Arcadia Bay, we are revisiting familiar locations, and as mentioned before, it does seem to be implied that over time, pretty much everyone else do forget about the merged timelines. You know, it's still possible to incorporate this idea. I think there are two solutions to this. My first idea would be to give Warren powers. I'm hesitant on this one, I don't think it's necessary. With that said though, if we had to go down the route of giving Warren powers to explain why he's being affected differently by the timeline merge, I think he would gain the ability to see events from the past. Specifically, Max's past. The idea here is that every time Max used her rewind powers, an imprint of her memories was left behind. A weird time distortion sphere representing Max's past was left behind in every location she rewinded time. It's a temporal aura, going all wibbly wobbly timey wimey in this shit. Gameplay wise, I'm picturing it looks kind of like what Max sees when she's hopping from one timeline to the other during double exposure. Think something like that in terms of visual, what it looks like. To everyone else, it's harmless. Hell, they can't even see it. But Warren starts to see them. And as he approaches them, he starts to feel a pain in his head. As he gets closer, he starts to hear a familiar voice. But it's not present day Max, he's hearing Max from the past. And if he triggers this sphere-like aura of time, he will see a recreation of a scene that took place at the same location involving Max. This would be a way, I guess, you could have Warren realize that Max does indeed have a connection, as well as Chloe, to this storm. And this just gives him more context on what Max was up to during the events of the original game that he obviously doesn't fully remember now. A logical route to take without powers would simply be Warren being determined. He's actively trying to focus on these visions. He's trying to force them to happen so he can see them more clearly. He wants them to happen. Everyone else around him is seemingly ignoring them, or even if they notice something a little bit off. Going back to Joyce in the Two Worlds Diner, maybe while Joyce is talking about Chloe, she catches herself saying something that doesn't make sense or is a bit inconsistent with her memories of what she knows happened to Chloe before. But she just brushes it off, doesn't think much about it, and just carries on. Warren, on the other hand, he doesn't let it go. He's obsessing over it. He wants to figure it out. Now, obviously, I don't think this should be the entire story of the game. I think this would be the opportunity to introduce other characters that we never met from the original game, who possibly also was taken out by the storm. Warren could meet a new cast of characters from Arcadia Bay, who also have these conflicting memories of what happened, because guess what? Even though we never met them before, they were killed by the storm in Arcadia Bay. This could be the opportunity to introduce a new love interest for Warren. Like I already said, he and Max have not spoken to each other in years, and that is mainly because Max just chose to distance herself from Warren, as well as everyone else for that matter. And while we could still say that Warren misses Max, and more on this in a moment, but I believe this would be Warren's opportunity to really officially move on from whatever feelings he had for Max. The player can choose to let Warren completely move on from her and be with a new character, a new love interest. And this leads into what I think one of the main themes of this game could be with Warren. How much should you focus on the past, and how much should you let said past affect your future? Should we let him be really obsessive over it? Should we really let him experiment or try to understand it a bit more? When potentially during his journey, obsessing with the past is affecting his potential future. With or without a love interest, maybe coming back to Arcadia Bay has given Warren new opportunities for him that could improve his life moving forward. Whether it's to do with his career path, whether it's a chance of something new, to simply having an adventure with a new group of friends, and like I just said, potential new love interest. Warren potentially has a chance of beginning a new chapter in his life. However, one of the things holding him back is how much he wants to understand his past. Even though it's conflicting and kind of messy with wibbly wobbly timey wimey shenanigans courtesy of Max, the past is still the past. This now new fused timeline is just the way it is. Should Warren eventually let go and also potentially just forget like everyone else seems to be around him? Or should we let him keep trying, with or without powers, force himself to experience these visions until he can learn and understand more about the past? Maybe this is the opportunity for him to realize that Max did have something to do with what happened, even without contacting her. He learns a bit more about what she and Chloe went through during the events of the original game, as well as possibly Rachel or even Jefferson, maybe learning and understanding a bit more on why Nathan was the way he was, stuff like that. But the big question is, how much should you focus on the past and how much should you let that affect your potential future? I think this could literally be its own video about this hypothetical story for Warren, so let's end it here. Those are my ideas. Please tell me what you think. I think this is probably one of the most significant parts of the video. With that said, let's move on and rewind even further back to before the storm. Okay, so now we are looking at characters from before the storm. To be honest, I don't think many of these characters need to return. There's not really a need for these characters to come back. And of course, most of the characters I'm talking about here came from the original game, so we are very limited on which characters to choose from for this one. I wouldn't mind catching up with Skip, seeing what he's been up to after the events of Before the Storm and likely the original game. Is he still with Pisshead? Is he making music in general? Is he part of a band still? Has he now become a solo act? Has he become a security guard somewhere else? I wouldn't be against catching up with this character. Don't have much else to say about him though. Maybe Sarah could come back? Rachel's mum? I don't think she would serve as a major role in the story, but if she did come back in a new Life is Strange game, maybe she could have a similar role that David had in Life is Strange 2, appearing in just one episode or chapter, helping the main protagonist for a little bit, telling both the protagonist and the player about Rachel and some of the events that took place during Before the Storm. I will admit, there's only one other character from Before the Storm that I have in mind that I feel like would make sense to bring back and potentially promote this character to the protagonist role. Steph's D&D friend, Mikey. Mikey obviously has a history with Steph, Chloe, to an extent Rachel, as well as the events of the original game, so there's a bit of backstory there we would definitely have to acknowledge. But just like Steph in True Colors, for the most part, Mikey is pretty much a clean slate. He can just be promoted to a protagonist as part of his own adventure in a Life is Strange game. I think it would work very well. Despite his history, you still have a character with a fairly clean slate that you can just do whatever the hell you want with moving forward. Maybe we could have a game that takes place after the original game and of course Before the Storm, but before Double Exposure, so we don't even have to worry about timeline shenanigans all that much. Just another game in the Life is Strange universe where we get to catch up with a familiar face. Even if she doesn't play a major role in the story, I feel like Steph should make an appearance in this hypothetical game. Maybe it could be a scene that mirrors what we saw in the bonus chapter from True Colors. Mikey and Steph playing D&D, talking about their past, and it's pretty much the same scene that we saw from True Colors, but the roles are reversed. We're playing from Mikey's perspective, and Steph is the one on the video call. If possible, maybe this game could take place during the events of True Colors, or at least maybe before the main plot of True Colors kicks off with Alex arriving. Maybe the game could start with the same D&D scene from True Colors, but like I suggested earlier, the roles are reversed. We're seeing it from Mikey's perspective. After that first scene where we get to establish the backstory of Mikey, talking about Arcadia Bay, the events of the storm, having a genuine heart-to-heart with Steph, Mikey's new journey starts the next day. I think for Mikey it would also be interesting to have a similar scenario like we had in Life is Strange 2. So, like Sean, Mikey wouldn't have powers, but he would meet someone else who has powers. And we get to play as Mikey, discovering his friend having these powers. And we learn that Mikey is the first person to learn of the powers that this individual has. As well as taking on a similar role as Sean, I think he could also take up a similar role that Moses had. Wanting to learn more, trying to understand these powers, running experiment, testing the limits of the abilities and the powers his friend has. So that would be my pitch for a game focusing on Mikey. We start off catching up with Steph, we get to establish the backstory, the events of the first game and Before the Storm, what choices the player made in said games if that needs to be relevant, and then after that scene we saw during True Colors with Steph and Mikey, the next day Mikey starts his new adventure, which involves him finding out that one of his friends have powers, and like Moses, he wants to run experiments, he has his theories, he wants to learn as much as he can, and then just like Sean, he takes on a supportive mentor role, trying to help them gain better control and understanding on how the power works. The final segment for this video, let's discuss the big three of the original game and Before the Storm: Max, Chloe, Rachel. Starting off with Rachel, let's just be blunt about it. She doesn't need to come back. Her story is done. It's a tragic, unfortunate end to her character, but her death is what made Chloe the way she was when she reunites with Max. Even with time travel, even with alternate realities, I don't think it would make sense for Rachel to come back, period. The only way it should happen, in my opinion, would be to mess with both the characters and the player. If Safi was the antagonist or just felt like being a bitch to Max and Chloe, she would take on the form as Rachel, pretending to be her from another timeline. Of course, we would also have to acknowledge that Safi's powers have changed a bit as well. Maybe they've evolved, gotten stronger. More on that in part 3 of this series. I think it's necessary for some stories in the Life is Strange universe to abruptly end with a layer of mystery still behind the character. Did Rachel have powers? Was she connected to the storm? Was she the doe that we saw throughout the original game? Does her spirit live on in some other way? Who knows? We don't know, and that's okay. Finally, we have our main duo, Max and Chloe. Despite it being a bit of a bumpy road, I'm glad we got Max back in Double Exposure. I'm glad we got to see Max and Chloe again, grown up in Reunion. A part of me wants to say, yes, they should keep coming back. A part of me wants to say, we should see them again. But I know that it's just my nostalgia and love for these characters. Max especially. I don't think I've crushed harder on a female character in a video game. Max is stunning. She's pretty much the whole package. Chloe, I'm so jealous. Warren, I'm so sorry you never got a chance. Vin, Amanda, and maybe even Safi, I completely understand why you were smitten over her. Trust me, I'm the same. That's right, Max, I don't have a collar. Call me whatever you want, please. Simping aside, I've always loved Max. I loved her in the original game, I enjoyed her in Double Exposure, and she was great in Reunion. Love and nostalgia aside, let's move on from Max and Chloe. Cameos, Easter eggs, references from other characters, I'm okay with that. And maybe is the key word in my next sentence, maybe if they do come back, they are not the central focus. We have one scene where our new characters meet either Max or Chloe, and then they just go off to do their own thing. Even that is pushing it in my opinion, but that is as far as I think we should go with the idea of Max or Chloe coming back. With all that said, I think I've rambled long enough in this video. We still have 2 parts dedicated to this very topic. This has been part 1 of returning characters for Life is Strange. Hope you enjoyed. Please leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section. I'm sure this will be a very interesting topic of discussion with a lot of varied opinions on both what I've said in this video and just in general on who others believe should return. Regardless if we can agree or disagree, let's try and keep it civil, let's try and keep it fun, positive, but by all means let's make it a little bit strange as well. It wouldn't be Life is Strange without the strange. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you in part 2.
This right here is my favorite thing ever in the history of forever. I think about this every day. I think about this all night long. I stay awake not sleeping because I'm thinking about this.